Welcome everybody to the Coastal Land Trust Little Lunch Lecture. My name is Stephanie Boret. I'm the Director of Donor Relations, and we're glad that you are here today. I think we might have some first timers today, so just FYI, we are recording and we are live on Facebook. Feel free to keep your camera on or turn it off if you want to. There will be some links in the chat if you want to check those out. Right now, click the link and it'll open up the page and you can go back to it after the Little Lunch Lecture. We're going to keep everybody on mute during the talk, but at the end during the Q&A, if you'd like to ask a question, you can take it off of mute yourself and ask your question, or you can type it into the chat and I will read it out loud to our speaker. Ranger Emily Bunyea studied environmental science at the State University of New York at Oneonta. After graduating, she worked for Parks and Rec in New York for a little while, and then a seasonal position brought her to North Carolina just a couple of years ago. And despite the fact that it does not snow enough here for Emily, she did decide to stay. She's been a park ranger for 2 years now and is currently at Merchants Millpond State Park, our topic for today. Welcome, Emily. We are glad to have you with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I'm glad to share with you guys a little bit about the park I've been working at. So if it's all right, I'd like to just jump right into it. So Merchants Millpond State Park is in Gates County. So it's the northeastern corner of North Carolina, pretty close to the Virginia border. And today I'm just going to do a little bit of bragging about the park. I'm going to focus a little bit on some of the history and background, but then eventually get into some of the biodiversity that we have to offer, some species of animals and plants, and basically kind of want to give you a little bit of a taste of some of the things you might see if you take a paddle out onto our pond. So I'll get started. Just a little bit of our background here. The park was established in 1973. Originally, it's the location of a grist mill. The mill, you can kind of see remnants of it today if you come to the park. Where the dam is, where Bennett's Creek flows out of the mill pond, is where the old mill used to sit. And this park was donated to North Carolina State Parks by a man named A.B. Coleman. So he originally bought the property and had it for a couple years, loved it so much, and decided to just donate the pond, a little bit of the acreage around the pond, to North Carolina State Parks. The rest of the land we acquired over time by purchasing off private owners, and then also the Nature Conservancy. We adopted some of the land from them. So total, the park is 3,500 acres. The pond itself is a little over 700 acres. And one of the most proud things that I think I have towards this park is that we have such an amazing amount of biodiversity. So we have over 3,000 recorded species of plants, animal, and fungi. So that's pretty impressive. But our main attraction, our pond, is dominated mostly by cypress trees and watertubular trees. And there's a bunch of other cool little critters that I'd like to talk about today as well. So here's just a snapshot from Google Earth of Merchants Millpond. You can kind of see the outline. Basically, the farmland is separated by the forested land. That's pretty close. That's pretty accurate to what our outline of our park looks like. So a lot of it is forested, but the main attraction of the pond there, it looks kind of like there's quite a bit of trees, but there's openness when you go out into the water. So we've got our cypress swamp, but a lot of it is open water, and then Bennett's Creek actually flows through. You can kind of see at the top there. Bennett's Creek comes from Laster Swamp and flows all the way through the pond directly out. Eventually, Bennett's Creek will be flowing into the Chowan River. So I also just included a little map. Besides just our natural environment that we got in the park, we also have some facilities that people that come can utilize. We've got hiking trails, we've got a bike trail, we've got some campsites, and then we also got some boat ramps and our visitor center, which I'm sitting in today. So our park is mostly open. We're not doing our hourly canoe rentals at the moment, but all of our campsites are open, our trails are open. So if you ever get the time when you're up here in Gates County, I really encourage you guys to come and check it out. Okay. So going back to our history a little bit, this is an actual picture of the old mill that sat off of where the dam is now and where Bennett Creek is running out of the mill pond. So this picture was taken in about 1930. It's a little rundown here. I don't know if it was actually it was actually working at that time that it was taken, but this picture is of what that mill used to look like in that location. In 2010, there was a hurricane that hit and actually found these turbine wheels that were remnants of the old mill. And that was in Bennett's Creek. They were covered under some silt. Some of the rangers that were working at the time found them. Now they're in display at our visitor center. So if you come on to the visitor center, you can check them out. There's a little bit of history that you can read about Merchants Millpond. Okay, like I said, I wanted to focus a little bit on our biodiversity. All the pictures you're going to see today, we have a database for North Carolina state parks, and all these pictures were taken by rangers or volunteers. So all of them are up in our database, and all of them are of species that we found in Merchants Millpond, our state park. So everything you see today is a living thing that is in the park. But of all the state parks in North Carolina, I can brag here, we have the most recorded species, over 3,000. That's not to say other parks have more species that are just not recorded, but we did a pretty good job, I think, in our park of taking inventory of what's living here. So I'm just gonna touch base on a couple of them. And these plants and animals, these ones I picked in particular are ones that you would see on a paddle. Hopefully coming to the park. So a lot of the times during the spring, we like to do guided tours, canoe tours. Unfortunately, due to COVID and due to a lot of our park being closed to the public with the canoe rentals, our hourly canoe rentals being closed, we're not able to do those tours. So I thought it'd be a nice idea to just kind of give you a little glimpse of what you might see if you were to take a canoe paddle out. And tour with the rangers. So I'm going to go through some of those species that you'll find on the pond itself. Not so much the forested areas, but the mill pond. So going back to the beginning, I mentioned water tupelo and bald cypress. Those are the two dominant trees that you're going to find on the pond itself. Once in a while, you'll find some smaller red maples, some smaller saplings that are able to take root on like the islands or the little bald cypress and water tupelo islands that they do form. But when we're talking about dominant trees that are able to successfully grow in all that water, mostly you're going to see the water tupelo and the bald cypress. So water tupelo are pretty cool trees. They're some of my favorite. People may refer to them as black gum, sour gum, swamp tupelo. They have many different names, but they're the deciduous trees with the oval-shaped leaves. They produce those little seed pods, and they get these kind of funky-looking arms, kind of weird growth-looking, and that actually happens because of another species that likes to grow into the water tupelo, mistletoe. So mistletoe is a type of parasitic plant, and the water tupelo will kind of react to that plant growing into it and grow in these weird, interesting shapes like that. So water tupelos are beautiful in their own way, unique, and there are many spots on the pond where you just have big mass growths of just water tupelo trees, a little water tupelo forest. Okay, so going back to like what I was saying, mistletoe, that's another very dominant plant you're gonna see on the pond. They're the plants that are growing into those water tupelo a lot of times. They like deciduous plants, or deciduous trees typically to grow into, but they're a parasitic plant, and so they're gonna be evergreens. You'll see them in the wintertime. I notice during the winter, if I'm out on the pond, I can see way more mistletoe just because they're just the only bright of green that you do see. With all the other trees we have, they're all going to be losing their needles as well. I'll go into the bald cypress. They, during the winter, they're all lost their needles as well. So the only green you're really going to see in the upper story is mostly going to be that mistletoe. So they're an evergreen, and they have this root-like structure that will just that will go into the the bark of the tree, of the Watertubular tree, and they'll take out water and nutrients from it. They don't attack the tree to the point where they'll die, but once in a while there are overinfestations of the mistletoe onto a Watertubular tree where it will affect it. Okay, this is a cool picture here. So bald cypress. These are our second most popular trees you can find at the park. They are all in the water as well. Bald cypress, they have that wide base, and then they grow up thin at the top, and then they have actually needles. They get their name the bald cypress because their needles fall off during the winter time. They go bald, like I say. And then they also have those little knees that poke out of the ground. So those are tricky if you're hiking through close to the water. Careful with the knees because they'll just be poking out. And same with paddling. When our water's real low, you can sometimes hit your canoe on the bald cypress knees. But this picture on the bottom here is actually one of our retired rangers, Floyd Williams. And he's just showing one of the trees that we have up in the Laster Swamp that we found is really old. We never got it accurately aged. We are estimated that's between 700 and 1400 years old. But it's a huge tree. It takes about 8 people to wrap their arms around just the circumference of it. So that's one of the impressive ones. When we do the guided tours, we like to take people up into Laster Swamp and show them that bald cypress tree. Okay, this is a very common shrub, water-loving shrub, buttonbush. So buttonbush, another perennial shrub, deciduous. They get their name buttonbush just based on the shape of their flower, and they like to start flowering June to August on our Millpond. So they're real pretty. There's lots of little clusters of those along the bases of the Watertubular and bald cypress trees. Another one I didn't add are main shrub that we have there, the wax myrtle. So those two are really dominant in the swamp there. Okay, so Merchant's Millpond is pretty famous for its alligators, but we really only have 3 alligators that are living in the pond that we know of, that we've seen in one paddle. The thing that makes it unique is the fact that this is the most northern range you're going to find the American alligator. So the first time they were spotted in the pond was actually by a fisherman. There was rumors that they were there, but in 1996, a fisherman actually caught one of the alligators and showed the ranger and said, "Hey, I just caught this in your pond." So at first we didn't release it back in. We actually contacted some of the natural resource department in Raleigh, let them know what was going on. We found an alligator in the pond. And then after some discussion, they just, told us put them back. So they've been there ever since 1996 when they were first officially spotted. And we think it's the same 3. They haven't been reproducing. We haven't seen any nests or any sites of babies. So they've grown pretty big. So around 8 feet. Big guys, and we think either they're all the same sex or they're just this too northern range for them to even reproduce. They just kind of wandered up here or someone introduced them, and they've just been able to establish a home here. And they don't have any competition, so they've been able to eat as much as they want. Typically they'll be eating fish, turtles, the geese. So they've been made a really nice home for themselves in the Millpond. Springtime is another great time for you to see the alligators, because after a long winter staying underwater, they like to come up, find those logs, and just sun themselves. So it's a popular attraction, definitely, but we don't have like highest number of alligators in the Millpond. It's more of just kind of a rare thing to find them this north. All right, this one is more popular though. So the eastern cottonmouth, we have a lot of these in the park. Is a venomous snake. So we try to tell people, you see one of these, definitely keep your distance. They don't like to strike, but when they feel threatened, they will show you a couple signs before they attempt to strike at you. So they get their name, the cottonmouth. If you look at the bottom picture there, the inside of its mouth is a nice cottony white color. That's one of the signs that they will show you that they're feeling threatened. Another one is they'll actually beat their tail, they'll vibrate their tail a little bit, kind of like a rattlesnake. They'll flare their body flat to appear a little bit larger. So they'll give you a little bit of a warning before they want to strike and use their venom. But a lot of eastern cottonmouths in our pond. I wouldn't say the number one snake. We also have the brown water snake, red belly water snake. We have black rat snakes, but they're not so much swimming in the waters. They're on the upland a little bit. So some of the other signs you could tell that a snake is venomous, besides just the, well, a lot of snakes will actually attempt to bite you, but to tell that it's venomous, if you look at the top picture there in the top left, the shape of its head, it kind of has like a V shape on its head. That's a sign. It's not a definite, but that gives you a little bit of a clue that this snake might have a venom that it cues against you. All right, Ahinga. So these water birds are pretty cool. They're not as common. I've seen one or two a couple times, but I just think they're so beautiful. So the top is a picture of it roosting up on a tree, but if you look at the bottom there, that's actually its profile. So it's got those really, really long wings and then its snake-like neck. So people give it the nickname snake bird, darter, water turkey, just by the shape of this bird. So they're pretty interesting, whereas the adult males are black with the silvery to white streaks on the back and wings. And then the females are more brown color, as well as the juveniles are the same kind of palish brown neck body. But I've seen these a couple times. In the pond, they'll mostly stay submerged, but you can see their neck and their head sticking out of the water, kind of hunting for fish. They'll eat small fish, crustaceans, things like that. And then often you can find them actually roosting and spreading out their wings, kind of soaking up the sun. So they're beautiful birds as well. All right, so those are just some of the animals and plants that you might see at Merchants Millpond State Park. It's just a quick blurb of what we have. I really recommend coming out to the park. If you have your own boat, I definitely recommend paddling out. The pond is our biggest attraction for a reason, just because there's so much biodiversity, so many cool little nooks and crannies as you're paddling through little forests of Watertubular or bald cypress. And if you get the chance to check out Lasser Swamp, that's the far side of the pond. That's where that big bald cypress tree is. That's also a really cool environment on itself. Unfortunately, right now we're not doing the hourly canoe rentals, but hopefully everything will open up soon and things will change a little bit with that. But I want to say thank you guys for having me today, and I hope you enjoyed looking at some of the pictures of some of the animals we have here at Merchants Millpond State Park, and come visit us anytime.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. I
No problem.
appreciate it. I'm inspired. I got spring break coming up with my kids. Maybe we'll head that way.
Definitely.
That's cool. There was a question in the chat about if you could remind us, what was the name of the man who donated the first tract for the park? And at the time, how large was it?
Okay, that was A.B. Coleman. The pond is 760 acres. So it was originally just the pond and a little bit of land around it. So I'm guessing around 800-ish acres. I don't know the exact acreage of what he donated, but he donated the pond total, which is 760. But A.B. Coleman is his name.
And that was in 1973?
That's right, 1973. He had it for a couple years before that, but he really didn't have it for too long before he decided to donate it to North Carolina State Parks.
Cool. And then you guys have worked to conserve an additional 3,000 acres. That is no small feat. So
Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah. If there are other questions, I would love for anyone who wants to ask Emily a question, you can take your microphone off mute and ask it, or you can put it in the chat. That's That's no problem. Oh, Harrison wants to know if you have kayaks as well as canoes.
We're working on getting kayaks. We haven't purchased them just yet. But like I said, we're not doing any hourly rentals for any of our watercrafts just because of the whole COVID thing. If you do come camping, we have canoeing campgrounds, and you can rent a canoe with that for 24 hours.
Very cool. Belle is curious, where is Lassiter Swamp relative to the Millpond?
So when you look at the map of the Millpond, so when you look at the map of the Millpond, the pond area itself, if you go a little bit up north of that, following Bennett's Creek up north, not Bennett's Creek flowing out of the pond, that's where Lassiter Swamp is. So I don't know if you have any relation to Gates County, but Lassiter Swamp is kind of close to like, what's that road? Silver Springs Road. Kind of heading towards Dismal Swamp.
Okay. We can Google map it, I'm sure. And couple other questions. What is the status of the longleaf restoration that was going on at the park?
We haven't planted any more long leaves. I mean, we've been doing prescribed burns and kind of trying to get rid of all the loblolly that we do have, but there hasn't been much of that. We have new property over at the bird property. It's off of 158. We have some new property that we're looking to plant some more native species. So I think longleaf is going to be on that list of some of the trees and plants we're going to be planting over there on that property. So
cool. Ken is curious, if you bring your own kayak, can you paddle?
Oh yeah, if you bring your own boat, our boat ramp is open until whatever time of year it closes. Right now, I believe it's 7 o'clock. So it's free to just launch your own boats, and that's totally fine.
Okay, cool. Pam, I think she just answered your question too about where to launch your kayak. And Kelly is curious if you could talk a little bit more about the bike paths. Are they rugged? Are they for mountain bikes only? I'm curious about that too.
Yeah. So we have about a 5-mile loop, 5-mile bike path loop. The first bit of it is, it was an old access road, so it is kind of flat. It's not really what you typically think of like a mountain biking bike trail. So it's easy. It's good for kids and families. And then the back side of it, it actually overlaps with our Lassiter Trail. So that's more trail-like, more mountain biking routes in the trail, and a little bit more rugged, more terrain. So I would say it's about half and half.
Cool. I asked a question in the chat. I'm wondering how many people on the call have connections to Gates County, because I heard at least 2 people pop in earlier and say, and I'm just curious if there are others. You could either make a comment in the chat, or you could raise your hand with your question button. I'm just curious. Lynn, if you said you were from Gates County, right?
Yes, I am.
And do you still live there now?
No, I live in New Bern. I am from Cora Peak. So it's been years since I've been to the pond, but my family still lives in the area.
Excellent. Well, maybe a family picnic at the state park next time you're home.
Exactly. Yeah, this was really interesting because it's been a long time since I've heard what's going on with the pond. And I'm glad that there's a ranger there that can keep things up to speed in spite of COVID.
Nice. Well, you know, having outdoor spaces is one of the things that has kept us sane during.
That's right.
So I'm very grateful for state parks and and other places that are set aside for recreation for sure.
Absolutely.
Cool. Are there any other questions for Emily before we sign off? Oh, Ken just made a comment. I'm going to read it. So he wants everyone to know about the Safe Places show now through the end of July at the Cameron Art Museum here in Wilmington. There are more than 80 paintings by Robert Johnson from his last 4 years camping in Carolina State Parks. And the notes are amazing. So if you're here in Wilmington or if you're coming for a visit, that sounds like a really neat exhibit to check out at the Cameron Art Museum. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. All right, guys, we are glad that you got to join us today. This was kind of week 2 of our miniature series with the state parks. I would love to have more state parks folks present in the series, but as we do have most of our weeks booked between now and all the way into mid-May. So if you're interested, check out our website .org/events. That will give you some details of the things that we have coming up. But I will tell you next week, Captain C.R. Robbins will be talking about the 3 sisters in the Black River. That is another story about some really big, really old cypress trees closer down here to Wilmington. So definitely will want to be here for that. And then on March 19th, Connie Parker is the president of the Alliance for Cape Fear Trees, and she will be talking about their organization. But check out the calendar on the website to see what else we have coming up all the way through May 14th. And let's see. On May 14th, I do want to mention, our executive director, longtime executive director and founder, Camilla Herlovic, just retired a few weeks back. And on May 14th, she and the new executive director will be for Little Lunch Lecture to do a looking back, looking forward at the Coastal Land Trust. So that'll be a really special time for you guys to join us. So definitely mark your calendars for that one. And I'll mention it a few more times in the next few weeks in between. But Emily, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for showing us a little bit about Merchants Millpond State Park. Appreciate it. And we'll see everybody again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. Take care.
Take care.